Hello, Africa, and welcome to Mining 901. I'm Aburengwi, and today we're speaking to Mfikeyi Makayi from KoBold Metals. Hi there, Mfikeyi.
Hi, Avirengwi. A pleasure to be on the Mining 901 podcasts, and I'm excited to talk about what we are doing as KoBold Metals in Africa.
Great, thank you. And again, thank you for making the time. Just going through your profile and trying to superimpose that on the developments around KoBold Metals. You've obviously had an impressive career in mining, including different leadership roles at First Quantum Minerals, Barloworld Equipment. What insights from your experience are you finding are proving to be the most valuable as you lead KoBold Metals Africa, particularly in discovering these new critical mineral deposits?
Loaded question, but I think my journey has really been full circle. The steps from where I started from were not really planned out, and I never thought I would end up what I call at the genesis of the mining sector, which is mineral exploration. I kind of worked my way backwards. So my background, I'm a civil engineer. That was what I studied first. And then I qualified to get a master's in environmental engineering and a master's in mining engineering. So obviously the engineering part comes at the end after people have done their discovery and they've developed the resources, and then you call in the engineers to do all the builds. So this has been sort of full circle, and especially in the African context, as a young African, at least I consider myself still in the young group, working backwards to how we manage these resources, how we can build out our countries. And really the steps were really just a bit of luck and taking leaps to go to places where people weren't going to. When I joined First Quantum and went to Kansanshi mine, it was around the 2008-9 recession, and I had just moved back to Zambia because I couldn't get a job in the US because there were no jobs, if you know what I mean. I wasn't a citizen. So I came back to my home country, Zambia, and I'm born and bred in the city of Lusaka. So I didn't grow up in a mining town per se, but here I am, and First Quantum's Kansanshi mine is growing. So I went there as a young civil engineer in the process plant, doing what I would call the odd jobs for the process teams. There, if you need concrete cast here, we need a process water pond built over there. We need to reinforce the retaining wall for the gyratory crusher. So I worked with civil contractors doing that kind of work. And life just started. Next thing, it was one step after the other, coming out of a process plant, repairing things. And I ended up in the mining division. At the time, the mine was looking for talent. So after 2.5 years doing these repair jobs on the mine, I got into the mining division because I think you would know mining skills generally, even mining engineers globally, are not having many people studying that field. So what First Quantum did was try get people from different backgrounds. So I was civil. There were a few from like survey. There were a few metallurgists, and they sponsored us to study mining engineering in the UK. So that's how I got an MSc from Camborne School of Mines. And I think I never looked back. I fell in love with mining. I think I just like the activity, the end to end. It's really industrial engineering where you're planning your shots. Well, the geologists are planning a shot there. They've got a mine plan. They want you to drill and blast there. You move to load and haul. So I went through those cycles of becoming a driller, a blaster. You go and work with load and haul. And that's how my steps just, I'll call them, got ordered into different parts of the business. The biggest thing I think I had was just the agility and the willingness to move around. That's quite key. And I was very fortunate to have a lot of geo friends and be mentored by one of Zambia's finest geologists, Mr. James Mwale, who passed away. And I would spend time in his caution talking about the problems in the mining side, but he was always looking at core, doing things with core. And I almost wish I paid attention more. If I had known, I'd be intimately involved in now mineral exploration. But at least I know what some of these rocks are in the Central African copper belt. I can identify them.
I can tell you, I studied geology, but I do struggle with identifying rocks. I do wish I had paid more attention in that class, but here we are. So I came across KoBold Metals when I started thinking about the world of AI and how that intersects with the world of mining. But maybe for those who may not be familiar with KoBold Metals Africa, can you just paint a picture of the company? What are you guys working on? How are you set up? And maybe what are some of the key focus areas and projects that you currently have that are underway?
Yeah, so I'll go back to the history of the company. I wonder if we still call ourselves a startup, but KoBold Metals is a startup company out of Silicon Valley. The two founders, Kurt House and Josh Goldman, founded the company out of Berkeley. And I think what was identified at the time was the gap in exploration, in particularly unlocking the research and discovery of these new critical minerals, what we call critical minerals today. Maybe 20 years ago, we didn't call copper, lithium, nickel, or cobalt critical, but now the term critical came in because there's a risk of disruption for supply, with the world aiming to electrify all its processes, whether it's the build out of new EVs, the build out of electrification systems to build infrastructure in the global north and the global south. There is not enough of these metals in current supply, in production, and even in pipeline. So there was a critical gap at the exploration stage. What we also noticed is the major miners who've been doing this for decades were not bringing projects on stream fast enough, and there was close to a $12 trillion supply. So we don't have, the mine grades are depleting. Recycling is not going to meet the gap. Where are we going to get all these additional metals that will drive the world to net zero by 2050? So that's where KoBold Metals realized that there was an opportunity, and there was an opportunity to leverage technology. At the same time, we have seen particular industries like the semiconductor industry start booming in their computing power just because of many advances in transistors. So how would we leverage in the mining sector what healthcare or big pharma has done in their sector, bring it back to the metal space or the mining space to advance technology and exploration? So often you'll find there are many mining delineation projects, where we call them resource expansion, where you lower the cutoff grade and suddenly now more metal is economic. But that's not really sustainable because it drives up your cost of production. And even with this critical metal supply, you are seeing the impact in commodity pricing going higher globally. So KoBold found an opportunity to say we started developing capabilities around using artificial intelligence techniques to explore the world. As they say, if you're looking for elephants, you go to elephant country. So where at a global scale, thousands of square kilometers scale, would people look for any mineral? It doesn't have to be critical, but any mineral from a geological perspective when you're prospecting. And then how do you start honing in on targets you identify based on hypotheses that geoscientists form up? Then how do you actually meaningfully explore them? The science of that hasn't really evolved in the last 50 to 100 years, where methods that were maybe used in the 60s, 70s are almost similar to now. However, we have capabilities with supercomputing, with building sensors, and the cost of that has drastically dropped. How do we apply that to exploring? So we want our geoscientists to spend a lot of time hypothesizing how any of these mineral systems formed, partnered with a data scientist or a software engineer to build out technologies to explore them. And that's what the company fundamentally does. We are amongst one of the largest companies spending in exploration and deploying our technologies across the board. So, for example, we have advanced technology group. They work on building hardware for the data scientists and the geoscientists to go explore an area. And what it is we also want to unlock the data in that area. We do know that there's a lot of historical data sitting across different private operators, sitting across different jurisdictions through governments, sitting in archives that people are not tapping into the fact that human beings have always left a lot of data around them. And how do you start using like that data in a meaningful way, or in a big way, as they call it, big data? So this is where KoBold's super competitive advantages are, where we build our own technologies, we partner if it makes sense, or you can buy technologies off the shelf. Many people do also sell it off the shelf. we didn't see a change in industry despite the fact that there are all sorts of artificial intelligence technologies out there. So we've defined the ability to predict everything around the natural world around us. In this case, where do we want to explore? What techniques do we want to deploy in, whether it's a geophysical technique or geochem, or you want to drill and test that target to prove your hypothesis. But we want to do it rapidly and we want to fail fast. We want to falsify the hypothesis fast. It takes many, many years for explorers to hypothesize an area before they walk away. At that point, you've spent millions of dollars. And this is what we've done quite well. We've got roughly 60 projects in about 13 countries around the world. I'm responsible for the Africa portfolio, but it's still a few countries. But the idea is to look widely as much as possible and quite aggressively.
I mean, it's been interesting that, at least from my perspective, investment in exploration on the continent has been on the decline. So when you mention how you are using AI to lower the cost of exploration, one then hopes that we will see a lot more of that happening on the continent. The statistic that we like to throw around is that 30% of the world's mineral resources are on this continent. So just imagine a world where, thanks to AI, the cost of exploring drops. One can only imagine where, as a continent, we are likely to go. So it's been fascinating to watch your approach. And I mean, you mentioned Silicon Valley. We don't naturally associate Silicon Valley with mining, but here we are. Mfikeyi, let's talk a bit about the Mingomba deposit. The development of that deposit has been a significant undertaking with aims to, I believe, start copper production by the early 2030s. What are some of the key milestones and investment phases that potential investors should be aware of as the project progresses? Can you just walk us through that in terms of where you are?
Yes, allow me to also talk about a point you've just mentioned earlier about Africa having 30% of the world's global natural resources or mineral resources. That's true, but AI alone or having the technology alone in a company and the capability is not what's going to unlock investment in Africa. So for context, it has to be coupled with the right policies in these countries. And naturally, as an African, we are naturally a bit protectionist because of the history of the continent, and rightfully so. So what we need to spend time doing, which what KoBold has done, is make sure that there's a local team, not only in Zambia, we're in Namibia, we have a local team, is spend time through empowering and having local management, but working with the government to lobby and advise good long-term policy that also builds out our countries. For example, I was privy to a certain paper that was shared with me by the president of the company that countries that have open access to data and allow data sharing between private operators and government also attracts a lot of investment. So you could have all this data, but if it's in your backyard Aviregui and you're not sharing it and no one can untap it, then it's almost meaningless. So we could have these 30% of natural resources, but if we can't quantify it or can't allow different competitors to come in and compete on fair terms or on meritable terms, we will kind of still be in the same state. We looked at exploration expenditure, I think we looked at the jurisdictions like Canada, Australia, and Finland. Canada and Australia, on exploration alone, not mining, exploration alone, have close to $1 billion in expenditure, averaging in the last 10 years. Pure exploration.
Wow.
We looked at then expenditure. Of course, we have to rely on what's been declared. There's also things that may not be declared. We looked at Zambia, Botswana, South Africa, Namibia. Those three countries alone was less than $50 million. So why are people choosing to go to, say, Canada or Australia? Someone would say, oh, but it's not as, the resource outlook is not as nice or as high grade as Central Southern Africa. Well, access to data. Once data is submitted to the authorities, there's a requirement by law, you submit your annual reports, it's made public, and it's on a digitized domain. That means once you're uninterested in that area, the next guy can come in and easily access it on a platform for whatever fees. Maybe there's a fee, maybe there's no fee. But what that does is quickly unlock information rather than sitting in Southern Africa, someone did some work, say 15 years ago. Then there's no access to that data. I come and spend and even design, say, the same geophysical program. Meanwhile, somebody did it earlier. Maybe the data wasn't as great, but we don't know because we've never looked at it. So what we want to advocate for is we shouldn't have these private gardens of data. If you really want to unlock the power of these new technologies, we need to democratize it a bit. I mean, obviously, that's also a debate with government officials. I've gone back and forth with them a lot. I understand where they're coming from. But if you want real investment that will transform the continent, many more KoBold Metals or other players, we need to bridge that gap. To your second question, Mingomba, right now, so just to give context to the speed that we've moved at here, we acquired the asset in late 2022. I joined the company in the middle of 2023. In late 2022, we had a very lean, small team of about 5 to 7 people, mostly technical people, geologists that were looking at the previous owner of the wider asset. And when we got what is now the Mingomba license, we deployed a drill rig, and between then and now, we have drilled close to 80,000 meters of diamond drilling in a space of about 18 to 24 months. If we compare that amount of drilling to what was drilled on this overall license from 1956, in 2 years, we have drilled about 70% of all the historical drilling done in about 70 years. So that's what moving fast looks like. So at this point, we know we have a consistent, high-grade chalcocite deposit that is about averaging 5% copper. Unheard of, with a few exceptions, is of course in the DRC, but if you look at global profiles, average copper grades are below 1% of copper. So we've quickly moved now into the engineering studies phase, or others will call it pre-feasibility or feasibility studies. But we've understood the nature of this ore body is about 1,200 to 1,500 meters deep, so it will be an underground mine. We've constituted a mine development projects team. So the exploration team is still drilling on the resource. We're also drilling in the wider license area, and we also have other areas of interest in Zambia that we want to start drilling this year. And so far, what we're now working on is closely ensuring that we complete all the technical studies work. So we have a geometallurgist working on the geomet side. We have the hydrogeology team. We have a mine engineering team dedicated to Mingomba. We have the shaft engineering team. We're working with a partner out of South Africa to just get the shaft engineering design work between now and next year. And the aim is to commence shaft sinking and permitting. Environmental and permitting works have also begun. So that's the nature of the confidence that we're moving with, that this definitely is an economic deposit. It is a large deposit that will be mined for many, many years. And we aim to start, all things being equal, we aim to start the construction works for the shaft by next year. And in the background, as we continue drilling, we're getting all the metallurgical samples for assays. The resource geology team continues to work on the main deposit as well.
You know, again, as someone who's been in mining for quite a while, there's sometimes this belief that the best deposits have already been found and the best ones have already been mined. And what you've just shared now it's really worth pondering on, to say, is it really true that the best deposits have been found? And what is this new technology going to do when it comes to maybe finding even better deposits? And what will that mean for the continent and for these local economies, in this case, the Zambian economy? But Mfikeyi, let's maybe talk a bit about scaling up your operations. So beyond the current project, you're aiming to scale up, I believe, other partnerships in the Zambian copper belt. What are your strategic priorities for this expansion? And are there maybe specific critical minerals beyond copper that you are actively targeting? Using this technology, but as a whole, as a company, are there other expansion projects that you're thinking about?
Okay, so starting with the best deposits, I'll be controversial. I'm sure the guys who invented the horse and carriage figured that was the best technology at the time, and then came in Ford with a motor vehicle, and then the car was the best thing. Next thing, as human beings, we were flying between countries. So I think you can deduce what I mean is, human beings have been innovative for centuries. We always find a better way of doing things. And that's just advancement of time, technology, and curiosity. And that's the edge we want to be on. We want to be disruptors. The other side is also true that if you don't disrupt or change, an industry or a business even dies. So we are at a sort of precipice, and we've seen it in the traditional consumer electronics world, where landlines don't exist. I'm sure now there are people who don't even know what a landline means. So are the best deposits found? I think the answer is we don't know. Why? We were limited to drilling just near surface. Let's start there. Or everything in the last 100 years since mechanized mining was outcropping. I'll use the Zambian copper belts. People could see these deposits. The indigenous Africans were smelting iron and they were trading copper for centuries. Let's always start there with the real discovery story, which we showed the European explorers when they entered the African continent, right? So then if your technology limited you to a pick and shovel and you can only dig 10 meters, that's about it. And then in comes machinery. Okay, now you can sink a shaft. And then in comes more technology, even on drilling. Exploration drilling, I got this stat from a colleague in Zambia. Drilling deeper than 800, 900 meters for the people who are in the exploration space was a bit unfounded, uncommon in Zambia. We as KoBold have now drilled the deepest hole in the Zambian copper belt. It's about 2,700 meters, 2.7 kilometers. And we want to understand the architecture and the architecture of the systems that formed these deposits or these domes. They call them the Kafue anticline and all of that. We want to understand, how did these systems form? So it's not exploration just because, oh, we found the ore body, stop everything, we're good to go, let's design the mine. Because back to the fact that the old deposits that we know of on the Zambian copper belt and even in the northwestern province, people have not drilled deeper. So can we say this is the best? I don't think so. So Mingomba is one. I mean, we are in a brownfield district. Everyone probably thought, okay, the Zambian copper belt is done. We need to diversify, which the country does need to diversify. It's not good to be heavily leaning on one sector, because then you have the impact of what is called the Dutch disease and other industries die. But it's a fine balance of ensuring that when the times are good, how are we seeding and building the other sectors around us? So I don't think the best deposits have yet to be found. I mean, seeing firstly, a few years ago, a 5% copper deposit would be like, wow, there's another one in Zambia. So maybe there are a few more elephants out there. The question is, what technologies are we using to hunt for them? And that's the space we're really excited to play in, not only in Zambia. We're prospecting in southern Namibia. We're exploring in southern Namibia. We're prospecting in Botswana. We don't have any ground, and we're looking for ground there. They're just opportunities. We've got a team that also is looking at desktop studies in Angola or in Tanzania. That's just how we should be looking at things. Like, the best has not yet been found. The earth, the world will regenerate itself. You've been a geologist. You guys think in millions of years. You'll say, 1 billion years ago the system formed. Okay, maybe another system is forming for the next billion years.
No, true. I mean, it's human nature to think whatever is happening now is as good as it gets. But those who have studied history will tell you that in 10, 20 years' time, like what we're doing today, we'll wonder how we survived. So I really like your perspective that with better technology, we are then likely to find and do better. Let's talk a bit about Africa. I think Africa's need for critical minerals to drive industrialization is well documented. Beyond resource extraction, how does KoBold Metals see its role in contributing to the industrialization of the continent? If you have any views on that at all.
Yes. So this is it's so critical to the next stage of Africa's development. I always say the continent is also traumatized by our colonial history, which really was also an economic exploitation. And that understanding of what the continent or African countries went through to get liberalized, to get economic, to get politically free, firstly, and now we're talking about getting economically free, is how do we actually become a global player? only is it between 2% of travel globally is into Africa, which always shocks me, despite the fact that you see so many people coming to Africa. Similarly, intra-African trade is only 15%. We trade 15% amongst us, and really that's driven by South Africa just because of the networks and the logistical networks between South Africa and Southern Africa. You look at the Eurozone, internal trade in the Eurozone is 70%. You look at North America, they call it NAFTA, and the North American Free Trade Zone, their trade is like 80% amongst each other. So for us to really firstly industrialize, we need to understand that we've got the youngest population, and this youngest population is looking for things to do. Firstly. Secondly, we have to stop thinking within the limitations of our geographical borders, which were not even drawn by us. A number of us have relatives from other countries or neighboring countries. So the thing is, we need to start moving within the continent. That's a big deal for me. I see myself as an African first and as a Zambian second. Yes, I might move with a Zambian passport, but I'm glad to hear there's always talks of an AU passport. Similar to our colleagues, the EU, they have an EU passport. You'll be a German national, but they call it an EU passport. We should start speaking like that. So I think it starts with our own mindset and our own will to do trade or just travel amongst each other. We've started seeing African countries lifting visa restrictions between each other. Those are simple, quick moves to say, you know what, it should be easy for me to go to Tanzania and even build a network of Tanzanian business people or Kenyan business people. It doesn't really matter the nationality. For us to actually understand trade opportunities between each other and then industrialization opportunities between each other. I once did a personal study out of my own personal interest of rice. Zambia produces rice in a very small scale. There are 3 types of rice from 2 parts of the country. And then I looked at Angola, and Angola gets its rice from, I think, Vietnam or Thailand. But borders Zambia, where there's actually substantial production. Again, it's not in the yields that are notable, but it should be enough to trade. If that business of moving rice between Zambia and the Angolan demand, which Angola has a bigger GDP, a bigger population, so they should be a pull, we should be talking about building road or rail networks directly into Angola. For food, for rice, most times we're talking about how do the commodities move out. What about the food that will feed African people? It's down to simple things like that and having those conversations and moving. I'm originally from the capital city, Lusaka. I moved to another part of the country because I'm in mining. There's no way I'll be mining from a capital city. But in moving to another part of the country, I'm in a border town with the DRC. I realized that here it's not only about knowing English and French, also understanding Swahili. So wanting to learn some of these languages, which AI can also help you with, and saying, I want to be a trader. I look at the traders at the border. Many of them speak 6, 7 languages. And I'm thinking, that should be a flex. Like, communication is the first thing that should drive industrialization. If I can't speak the next door neighbor's language, then I'm not going to be doing business with him. So just to simplify that, the industrialization starts at an individual level. From an individual level, it starts at, right, what is the dynamic of this town? What do we produce? Is it tobacco? Is it food? Is it copper? Whatever. And then where are our governments looking in the near term? What big projects are coming on board to either interconnect countries by road, rail for the movement of goods and services? Because those are the business cases that investors look at and say, you know what, there's a business case, I'm going to get a return here. There's this big African population, there's 1.3 billion of them. They are moving around a lot, and hopefully we're moving within our continent. That should be an opportunity to build road, to build rail, to drive energy. I mean, the energy crisis, and Zambia is having one, but generally, this continent is just under-electrified. How do you build an industry or a manufacturing facility without energy? So I can go in left, right, center, but in terms of KoBold space, in building the Mingomba project, the team and I have to be aware of what are the immediate economic impacts in this mining town? What are the things we're going to need? Housing. What does needing housing mean? We're not real estate developers, but are we quoting real estate developers to say, we think this is going to be the workforce of the next 20 years? Can you please find a housing solution? Because we're going to have an influx of migrants who will be coming to stay around the mine. These people will bring different skill sets. So then that stimulates services and support. All these people who will move in will need food. Where is the food going to be sourced from? Are we going to be importing oranges and things like that? Where are the farming blocks around here? Utilities and services. the municipality usually runs this. Can we get private utility builders, whether it's microgrids for energy, whether it's a water company? So it's thinking like that. And in our discussions, even with local authorities, we do speak like that, which is why we put a lot of our content out quite publicly.
Thank you. As you were talking, I was thinking about so many different things. A few years ago, we spoke about a rising Africa. Today, earlier we spoke about the continent having 30% of all mineral resources, and we really want Africa to compete. And yet a simple thing as a visa requirement for me to go to Lagos, it's such a huge thing. And it's deeply frustrating that the leadership within the continent cannot solve something like that. You spoke about the Eurozone earlier, free movement from one country to the next. Last year, I wanted to visit Nigeria, just to visit. After 6 or 7 days of struggling with the visa requirement, I ended up rather going to the Middle East. And I thought, how much are they losing in terms of the influx of tourists just because your visa requirements are so strict? But anyway, I digress. And let's go back to KoBold Metals. I'm wondering how you are positioning yourself to maybe capitalize on some of the trends that we are seeing. And I'm thinking specifically of this AI-driven exploration and mining. How are you positioning yourself to deliver maybe significant returns for your investors, assuming, of course, that your investors are expecting big returns for the big investment that they have made?
The biggest thing that we do is making sure the models we build or the technology we build is unlocking value for our shareholders, for our investors. So how we design our exploration programs requires us to build physics-based predictive models that use high-power computing to unlock areas where there's high prospectivity. And you go and test that hypothesis. And these models are built with our data scientists at the core, software engineers, and the geoscientists. So they're literally one brain. We're not a mineral exploration company where it's the geologists that have to do and think and do everything on their own. They collaborate heavily with the data scientists. The data scientists tap into the geologists, so the geoscientists' experience of any mineral system. So how we've broken it out is you have a nickel team, we have a copper KoBold team, and we have a lithium team. And they sit together and hypothesize what are we going to do and what models in terms of artificial intelligence models or machine learning techniques are we going to deploy to explore this area. And they come up with that and we deploy it. But the thing is, we want to deploy it quite rapidly, and these models are meant to improve themselves. So you've got your inputs, you've got all this historical data, drilling in the sediment-hosted copper systems. How did these things form? What tests are there? What soil sample information is there? And you input it into this model and you ask it, run these predictions of where I should be exploring or where should I put my drill hole, and test that drill hole. So you say, all right, I want to predict that the copper grade will be this. In the case of Mingomba, the copper grade will be this. It'll be at this depth and it'll be this thick. Then we also ask what we call the human intelligence. So we say AI and HI. The HI is human intelligence. We ask the geologists to run their own predictions. So the geologists will say, I think the grade will be this, or there'll be no copper, 0 grade. This is the thickness. And then we go and test and validate and we drill that hole. And then now in practice, when you're drilling that hole, you have a targeted pierce point at a certain depth. But life happens. This is an operation. Your holes can deviate. We want to quantify the uncertainty even in the deviation of a drill hole. And this is happening iteratively, continuously for every drill hole that we plan between the geologists, the drill operators, and the data scientists. Then as we're drilling, we've been creative on the hardware we want to put on the drill. So right now, a lot of the drill rigs don't have a lot of automation or telemetry on them. I want to be able to know, how do I log the hole as I'm drilling? So we're partnering with a company to just do what we call through the bit logging. Normally, you drill, you get your core out, it goes to a core facility. Your geologist spends hours and hours basically logging the core, processing the core, and then we upload the core into the cloud so that even our computers and our models can look at the core and try make inferences or try make new predictions of what we should do next. And that's what we do, I would say, at scale. So we do not only generate one hypothesis, we generate an ensemble of different hypotheses of what happened in the system, different possibilities, we call them ensembles, but different possibilities of what was happening in the system, where does this resource pinch out, where is it continuous, how deep is it, and we move quickly. And this is why Mingomba, within that 80,000 meters we drilled, was really down to our abilities to use all these regression systems or Gaussian process regressions, different algorithms that come from what we call it the ML toolkit, to say how should we be looking at this data. So what's really important for even the type of investors we have a number of climate technology funds, we've got technology investors, and they ask quite pointed questions to us when we have our engagements with them, or what have you done differently? And we're also unafraid to say, it's okay to make mistakes. Like, there is cases where there's bad science, and every discovery or every even invention, there were mistakes made. We want to learn from those things, but we want to learn very, very quickly. We don't want to keep going down one path nonstop. So we run this quite aggressively, and it's a highly dynamic team also sitting around the world. So we've got the team that's based in Zambia, where I am physically now. I'm on site at Mingomba. You have our team based in the US, some live in Silicon Valley. There's a smaller group based in Australia, looking at Australia and New Zealand. So I think we actually don't even have a proper working day, because we're working across so many time zones, and we're working quite in a live manner. So the activity of a geologist at KoBold is a bit different than in a traditional sense, which is why even in our geology team, we want them to work closely with data science. And the data scientists, some of them have come from industries unrelated to mining, oil and gas. Our software engineers, some of them worked for Apple or Lyft or Google, never been to Africa, never stepped even on a mine, may have had different views of what mining is. So when you get people with very different backgrounds like that and you put them in the room, innovation happens, disruption happens, because then we're all co-learning. Like, I've never seen this code, I've never written a Python code, but I want to be able to do this to aid automating my work.
When I was going through your website, I went to the career section and I sort of saw some of the roles that you have. I thought, man, over 20 years ago, I studied geology, but the things that are listed here, I don't remember studying these things. So I began to wonder where you then get a geologist, as an example, who has a good understanding of geology, but they also have a good understanding of maybe topics such as data science, modeling, etc. Because I know universities are not the most, it's a strange thing, but they're not the fastest moving institutions. So I don't know where you then get your geologists and other professionals who have a good understanding of both worlds. By that I mean mining and AI. But I'm sure you have your own system that allows you to filter through the different applicants that you get.
So to the first question, you don't find them like that. That's the truth, including myself. The company is looking for brilliant people in general, across all sides. For example, there are data scientists who don't know anything about mining. So there's also that reverse education. So it shouldn't be looked at, oh, the geoscientist needs to learn all these things. The other side is also true. So what it is it's curiosity, understanding that we are at a place in the world where there's a shift. And are we recognizing that shift, and are we willing to relearn? So myself, maybe I was fortunate in my previous job. I'm nowhere near a data scientist, but I sold a product that had a lot of technology on it, and I had to train the new owners of these Caterpillar pieces of mining equipment that had all this telematics on it, all this automation on it. So that was one part of the sector that was changing, is the modern machinery had so much technology on it, similar with our phones. So data science, even as a field, and I stand to be corrected, as a course taught in a university, data science it cannot be more than 7-8 years old as a course. Right. It's only actually come up now, and many data scientists actually come from a physics background, which is an earth science at the end of the day. So you find that, okay, the term is actually very new, but the principle of a data scientist is really strong element of mathematics and statistics and physics. That is what many data scientists have actually studied as their primary degree at first. Then the word data science has come in like in the last couple of years. That's the first one. Second one, how do we actually prepare the workforce of the future for this shift? So in Zambia, what we've done is we've partnered the KoBold University with Stanford University on a master's co-teaching program on geoscience and data science, because we know that for the geologists of the future to be equipped, they need to start learning it now. So it is actually a new curriculum and a program in Zambia. We managed to get one of our partners from Stanford University, who's also a colleague of the co-founders, to speak with the local universities in Zambia, look at those who were looking to do a master's in geoscience and data science, and co-teach this together. So it's a mix of online and in-class. The US faculty is teaching it online, but I think 2 or 3 times a year, the US faculty for data science will come spend some time in Zambia at the 2 universities, University of Zambia and CBU, teaching geoscientists the data science elements applicable to mineral exploration. So that's how one way we can prepare the workforce of the future. In what we do now, it's basically on-the-job training. So in-house, I've got about 14 interns from different backgrounds: environmental health, business, mechanical engineering, civil engineering, geology. All of them have gone on like coding Python courses. They have to, because this equips them on the job now. And then we give them tasks like, we need to automate this. Can you write a code for this? It's very, very new and it's uncomfortable for all of us, including myself. So when I got this role, I enrolled into a data science course with Columbia University because online. And I was just like, I need to understand principally what this is. So it's a learning environment. It's a highly scientific company. We consider ourselves more of a technology company and not a traditional miner. Firstly, we've never even run a mine as a company, even though a number of us have a mining background. But we leverage technology, and science is really, really our hinge. And it's talked about almost every day in the company. So for me, it's a space of disruption and relearning. And I think for Africa, if we want to get ahead, we need to actually become that center of excellence. Like, we need to be willing. We shouldn't be afraid, like, this is new. Can I learn this again? People go do PhDs after 60 because they are bored, because the human mind has the capacity to learn again. So when we look for talent, the curiosity is actually the first thing, the self-learning. And with democratization of education, you can learn anything from anywhere in the world, from any institution. The question is, for us young Africans, are we willing to do that? That is what is going to separate us from good to great.
Okay, I'm currently listening to this and I regret that we only have limited time. I honestly can do this for the next 8-10 hours, but I do need to respect your time because there are so many pathways that we need to explore. And honestly, I cannot tell you how much I've appreciated this conversation. So thank you first for making yourself available, but secondly, for just opening a door into your world, the world of KoBold Metals, the world of AI. I've thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. Maybe just last words, if there's anything that you want to share with the Mining 901 audience before we bid you farewell.
Thank you, Everenry. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and always open to a part 2. If it's a more specific part 2, great. I think we're at a time where you're going to see new companies like KoBold Metals coming into the mining space. It won't be traditional business as usual. And with that disruption, that is good. And I want to see this happening in Africa. I think the global north, they're used to taking each other out. That's what makes the world competitive. That's what actually grows a country's wealth, is competition and innovation. So new players entering the market of any form, with any form of new technology, and all of us, it's a race. Now, I think I'll close with this quote as a takeaway, and I think it's an African quote. I'm not too sure, but it says, every morning a gazelle wakes up. It knows that it must run faster than a lion for it to survive. And the same quote says, every morning a lion wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the slowest gazelle or it will go hungry. It doesn't matter whether you are the lion or the gazelle. In the morning, you better be right.
That is the perfect way to end. Mfikeyi, thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.